Is The Great Gatsby family friendly?
Part of what makes it interesting is that people are not distilled down into heroes and villains.
2 of the 3 workshops, we lost our Gatsby.
It's about class.
Yes.
It's about money. I think it's very much about marriage.
Live cars on stage.
I think he said something along the lines of, sure, sounds cool if I'm not starring in a Marvel movie. I think he said that.
I'm Marc Bruni, the director of The Great Gatsby.
I'm Kait Kerrigan. I'm the book writer.
My name is Nathan Tysen. I'm the lyricist.
I'm Jason Howland, and I'm the composer.
And so we're going to have a roundtable discussion, my friends, today to talk about bringing... Already started swiveling. This is the one thing I was told not to do. We're 20 seconds in. My friends, we're going to have a roundtable discussion to talk about bringing The Great Gatsby to the Broadway. And we're going to start by answering the internet's most asked questions about The Great Gatsby musical. And then we'll dive into some deeper questions about the creation of the show and bringing it to Broadway, okay?
Sounds good.
We're going to start easy, rapid fire. Anyone can answer at any time.
Is there a buzzer?
We'll see if points are awarded, depending on answers, okay?
Keep it score.
So here we go. Question number 1. Is The Great Gatsby musical coming to Broadway?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
It's going to be at the Broadway Theater.
On 53rd Street.
It's going to it's going to have its first performance on March 29th, which is not very long from now.
No.
That's very soon.
Okay, now, who did the music for The Great Gatsby musical?
Me.
Jason Howland.
Jason, have you written other Broadway shows?
I wrote a Broadway show with Nathan Tysen, and it was Paradise Square.
Yes.
And before that, I wrote Little Women the Musical.
Fantastic. Okay, I was about to say who is The Great Gatsby, but no. Who wrote The Great Gatsby musical?
We did.
Well, everyone at this table except me.
Kait Kerrigan wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
Nathan Tysen wrote the lyrics.
Yes.
I wrote the music.
Now listen, my mother doesn't even understand what book means, right? You didn't write the book.
I didn't write the
Scott
book.
Fitzgerald wrote the book.
That's right.
What is the book of the musical?
The book of the musical is the structure of the musical. It's sort of the framework within which we can have songs. It takes you through dialogue and then lands you in musical moments and then takes you out of that musical moment and lands you in more dialogue and more scene changes. And it's a lot of transitions.
You're hired.
Officially called the libretto.
The libretto. But the libretto is also the lyrics. It's all the
Right,
words.
and an opera.
So you collaborate
Interesting.
together.
Yeah,
on
so
a
we
libretto.
are librettists.
Librettists.
You are
Together.
the librettists. of
Libretti.
The Great Gatsby,
Libretti.
the musical.
No.
Right.
Okay, is The Great Gatsby family friendly?
Ooh.
Mother of 2? At the moment.
I would say not very. I think you could bring your high school kid to it for sure. I think it's great it's kind of actually a weird thing that we read this in high school, but we do. And so therefore, yes, you can bring your high schooler. You could probably bring your middle schooler if you give them a little bit of some content warning. There's a great there's a great media site called Common Sense Media that will tell you about the book and the things that you should warn your kid about if you're going to share it with your child, and it would warn you about the things that you're going to have in our musical. We did bring our 8-year-old daughter to see the show when we were at Paper Mill, and she loves it and is kind of obsessed with it. But we had a strategic bathroom break, and she also knew the entire plot before she showed up. So I think that with younger kids, like under 12, it's not super family friendly. But, if you have a very precocious, musical obsessed child, like I was as a kid, I also knew Sweeney Todd by heart by the time I was 8. So if it's that kid, then yeah. But if it's not, you probably should wait.
But family friendly is also, it goes 2 ways, right? One side is like language.
Yes.
We don't have, all of our language is family friendly.
Yeah.
So
The
that-
language is completely family friendly. There's no F words.
Right.
There's
we're
no
not
curses.
dropping
Yeah.
bombs like that.
No.
It's more about the
Content.
The events and the content
Yeah.
and what happens.
And it's more stylized than watching a movie.
Right.
But there's definitely moments that there were just some images that I didn't want my 8-year-old to have inside of her brain.
I think a lot of people, depending on how long it's been since they read the book, forget just how dark it gets at the end.
Yes.
And that has been something that we can talk about later, the challenge of like keeping it light and putting some hope and
until
some up at the
everything
end.
starts to turn south.
Right,
Yeah.
which has been a fun challenge. But, as Daniel Tiger says, before you do something new, talk about what you'll do. So if you want to look
Did
at
you just
the...
say Daniel Tiger?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're talking about Fairly Friendly.
I mean, that's what we did with our daughter. We
Yeah.
kind of talked her through the plot points
Right,
so she
right.
knew what was coming and she could handle it.
Yeah, and I mean, she watched it. She saw it twice when we were at Paper Mill, and the first time we took more breaks, and we walked out into the lobby for a larger portion of it. And then the second time, she was like, "We're just leaving for that one moment that you said I have to leave for, and then I'm staying for everything else."
I want to see the rest.
Yeah.
So the quick fire answers have been going really well. Just
Right,
want everyone
slowly.
to know that we're
Fast.
only
So
halfway
rapid.
through. I'm going to add another question here. Previews versus opening. What does that mean? Is that
Previews means we get to keep tinkering and making things happen and
Futzing.
rehearse during the day.
It means we're all still relevant.
yes.
And then opening means that we're irrelevant and the cast does what the cast does.
And we were sent home.
And they said goodbye to us.
Which means
At a certain point, the clock goes off and we pencils down.
right.
Famous quote that shows are never finished, they're merely abandoned.
That's right.
lot of
At a
sense.
certain point, you run out of time.
Run
and
out of time, run out of
that's
money.
The version
That's
that we
what
end
you're
up
doing.
with.
Which means there's a very good chance that if you buy a ticket to a preview performance of The Great Gatsby and then buy another ticket once it opens, you're going to see a different
You're going
show.
to see the one and only time that version of The Great Gatsby is performed.
Yes.
right. That's
and
right.
we all are pretty. We like to rewrite. We like to change. So
Yeah, there
there's
will be
no
changes
way.
probably daily.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one of the most exciting and terrifying moments of the process.
There might not be changes between a matinee and an evening. So you've got a
Yeah.
good chance.
Right.
2 in 1 day.
2 in 1 day, you're probably going to see the same show.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But as an audience member, you are a guinea pig in the best way possible, and to know that the writers are sitting behind you, listening to how you react to things,
Audience is the missing character that we don't have in the rehearsal
Absolutely.
room. So.
Important partner.
it's great. What is the Great Gatsby musical about? Rapid fire? Wow. Okay.
It's about class.
Yes.
It's about money. I think it's very much about marriage. And it's very much about what the world was like in the 1920s and this wildly different time that just sort of happened after World War I. And I think that there's all this pent up. There's all these pent up things that came out of actually a global pandemic. And they had the Spanish flu, took over the world, and suddenly everybody was unleashed and throwing parties and going crazy. And the stock market was going crazy. And there's a lot of things that are very similar to things that are happening right now. But it's very much about class and money and the American ability, like whether or not there's such a thing as class mobility.
Whether there's such a thing as the American dream.
Yes.
Although that word, nobody said that word
Right.
until the 1940s. Right? 30s? Which we didn't know that.
Yeah,
but now we
colloquial
know.
phrase it became, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we see a man who grows up in one class and decides to remake himself
Mm-hmm.
in order to regain a relationship with a woman he was in love with before going to war, and comes back and has made himself into one of the richest men of his time, and then we follow what happens when that obsession and that goal that he's pursuing. We see how that plays out against the backdrop of this society where the haves and the have-nots are more disparate than ever, which feels very, very much of our
Or now.
time now.
Yeah. The other funny thing about it is that F. Scott Fitzgerald basically did exactly that with marrying Zelda Fitzgerald, who is Zelda Sayre. And it's really wild that then he kind of fell apart after this book. This book didn't do very well when it first came out. And it wasn't until after his death that this book became really famous. And it was sent off to the soldiers in World War II. And so suddenly you have these mirrors of these stories and that American dream and like how far away that dream is and whether or not you can ever, get to that in real life or if it's I don't know, longer legacy.
I also feel like we were talking about this the other day, the way our politics are playing now, that we seem to have two competing ideas about your access to the American dream.
Yes.
Whether you're allowed to have access to the American dream, who's stopping you from access to the American dream. I find that the farther we go with this and the more I'm watching our current election cycle, the more I'm
and
humbled and scared by that.
Yeah, how much the deck is stacked.
That concludes our speed round.
Wow.
Congratulations, everyone.
Speed is relative, apparently. We're certainly not moving as fast as things were in the 20s.
Okay.
So,
Marc has some cuts.
All right. Some cut suggestions we'll go over later.
Let's go back over those answers, trim those down.
All right. We've got some additional questions prepared for us. Are we ready to dive in?
Let's go.
What are you most excited for in bringing Great Gatsby to Broadway, starting with Jason Howland?
The scale and the scope of the story, everything from the physical production to the emotional content allows for both grandeur and excess and incredible intimacy. And I feel like that's the thing we're doing that I really love the most. I'm excited about that.
Nathan?
We just finished a kind of record-breaking run at the Paper Mill Playhouse. And there were just so many people that were not able to see the show.
Yeah, sold out every show.
It sold out every show, sold out before our first performance.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to share it with the world. But of course, before we share it with the world, I'm very excited to put in all of these new ideas and tweaks that we learned from the Paper Mill Playhouse, and put it into this new version of the show. And Jeremy Jordan and Eva Noblezada are truly remarkable. Of course, the rest of our cast as well. But we just did an event last night, and they brought me to tears, and
they were
it's
extraordinary.
Magical.
Their voices just have something magical about the way that they entwine with each other.
Yeah,
that's really that you can't plan for.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
it it sort of happens, and they hadn't even met each other.
They had not, and that's the thing. Like, will there be chemistry?
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember day one, we were a little nervous, and 5 seconds.
I mean, they
later,
had like one coffee before the first rehearsal,
Yeah.
I think, and then you put them in a room together.
was immediate.
And
Kismet.
yeah,
Kismet and fart jokes. That's the
true.
wild
That's
fact
true.
about Jeremy Jordan and
That's
even
true.
Indeed, we're
Noblezada
both, for sure.
is that they're
Yeah.
incredibly sophomoric and
true
also
story of-
the most romantic couple of all time.
yeah,
It's hilarious. I'm really excited about. I'm excited. I love this. I love the set. I love the costumes. I love everything that everyone else did. The score is so beautiful. The orchestrations are so exciting. It's really crazy to be allowed to make something this big and epic, and to have it have the title and name recognition of the Great Gatsby. So nobody's asking you like, why are you doing this? Why is this going to Broadway? There's something really, it's just sort of tumbled forth and it just happened to us. We only started writing this 3 years ago.
Right.
And so to be able to be on a ride like this where it has not stopped. We have never not been working on this during that 3-year period. And then to be able to go from Paper Mill to making changes to putting it on Broadway, I feel like we're in like the 1950s or 60s.
Yeah, it's like
the way we used to make musicals.
Yeah.
Show. Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
something so amazing about having that momentum and that continuity of thought that we've always been trying to do the same thing. We're not like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board and make a completely different idea, which sometimes happens when you work on something for 10 years. And I'm so thrilled that we have, it just feels like this train that we hopped onto and like is barreling forward in a way that is really exciting. And it always feels like all the ideas are additive and connected.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
it feels
Shin.
like one engine.
Yeah.
Which is very
Yeah, I
cool. I've
think
never
we're-
experienced that before.
I mean, we're incredibly lucky to have a producer who has given us the resources to be able to achieve something with the scope and grandeur that you expect when you think about Gatsby. I think we all read Gatsby and had a picture in our heads about what that, or even from seeing the multiple movies or other treatments, but the sort of the expansiveness of that, of the party aspect of it, that we're able to achieve through incredible design, but at the same time allowing for what musicals do best, which is having movies have close up, musicals have song. Right. So having these moments where we're able to dial into the emotional life of these characters and have people have watch the full bodied exploration of these hopes and dreams, not only of Nick Carraway,
Yeah.
but also of Daisy, of Jordan, of Myrtle, and
Gatsby,
and to find ways in which it intersects and has a conversation with the society that we're in now, and to make it feel like this is we're doing this in 2024, and yes, we're doing a period piece, but there's thematic resonances that feel very much of the moment.
And anytime you're making something with a group of people, like there's no way that you're not thinking about the moment that you're living through right now. And every actor is bringing their full selves to the conversation. And so every one of those perspectives, it's different than what F. Scott Fitzgerald did. He made something alone in a room, and we're making something with this group of people who all have a say in how we're calibrating this story. And so it is, of course, of the moment that we're in right now.
And this is a cast that looks like America of today, right? I mean, this is we have a group of people that are that are telling this story, but are representative of today's America. Right.
This is a good lead into the next question, which is, what are the challenges of bringing Gatsby to Broadway?
I mean, one of the biggest challenges of adapting this musical is just the fact that we were in a first person narrative, and then we had to step away from that and find our way into each of these characters in a way that the book never had to. Right. And then we have to also pay homage to the first person narration of the book. And so we actually kind of stepped away from the narrator in order to land the plane on these characters and make us really feel something for them. And then we have to go back, and we were like, okay, now we feel confident. Now we know who these people are.
Their inside life.
We know what we're doing.
Yep.
And then we had to sort of thread the needle on that and make sure that we get that really juicy language that's all not dialogue in the book, and try to find ways into the poetry of it so that you don't lose access to the heightened sensibility that the book has. And that's been a really interesting and challenge. It's always a challenge to try to take something that's first person and then put it on stage. Because like for me, the last thing I want is like someone standing next to the story for 90% of the story saying, this is how I felt as this person said this thing.
Yeah, Fitzgerald's narration is gorgeous, but it's kind of inherently untheatrical. And it was finding ways to make it active, and especially as the lyricist, I don't think no one wants to hear somebody sing Orgastic Future, right? Like it just doesn't really.
I really don't hear a melody for that one.
But I do think, on the other hand, there's something about it being a musical as opposed to being a film. Like there are some film adaptations that I think they have their moments. They're pretty fun.
Yeah.
But there is something more heightened about being in a musical, and like the tone of what you're able to achieve in lyric and in music does have a relationship with that narration in a way that I think a close-up does not.
Right. I just found myself taking more turns of phrase, small lines, or spoken dialogue. Seem to sing a lot better than kind of these like chunks of narration are just so beautiful. And I think what you've done beautifully is pick just a handful of times that we do get to hear that. But it's not overwhelming, and it's not too much.
This is a book that has so many iconic lines, and so you have to find a way into those lines for the people who really care about them.
Yep.
And then also the thing that was exciting to me was trying to contextualize some of the lines that felt more arch or flip or less emotionally grounded, which was a lot of times the female characters' lines, and they would say something and I'd be like, oh, why is she saying that? But it's something that I remembered from high school. And so I was like, well, I better land the plane on that. I better make that mean more make it mean more for myself, so that then hopefully it gives a different perspective on it than the read in the book, which for me was, the meaning was always like a little opaque, a little bit further afield, because it's all from Nick's pretty judgy perspective.
I imagine the physical production also. Adapting the Great Gatsby and putting it on stage.
Well, I think that kind of absolutely. There's a sort of expectation that comes with adapting something that everybody read in high school. Everybody has a starting point. But yet also you need to do something that meets people who have never encountered the book. And that was the interesting thing about seeing the audience at Paper Mill, was there were a lot of people that I think had forgotten what the plot is. And so as the events unfolded in Act 2, there was some surprise that came out of legitimately not remembering some of the turns of plot. Right. But in terms of the design, we have the most amazing design team. I mean, they are just so well suited for this particular material. Paul DePue, our set designer, has done an extraordinary job of creating this world.
Outdone himself.
Yes, set and projections. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Paul Tate DePue III.
Paul Tate DePue III.
Just the name. You're you have to hire him to do The Great Gatsby.
Absolutely. And his aesthetic is just perfect for this, and is giving the backdrop for. Yes, all of the opulence, but also to provide a canvas where the smaller, the tragedy is. You've described this as, well, I don't want to steal your thunder, but your line about this show that you've said from the beginning about what it is, about being a tragedy.
You can say it.
Okay, well, I
didn't want Annie meets Wicked meets Twister.
At the same time.
Well, Kate has often said that this is a tragedy disguised as a great party, and
I believe it was a tragedy just
as the greatest party you'll ever see.
Yeah, the greatest party you've ever seen.
Very good.
Is that what it was?
Very good. Well,
there was definitely greatest.
It was American tragedy.
We don't want to overpromise.
No, but you know what? But I think what's so interesting about the design conversation about this is, and what I love, there are a lot of people who probably didn't read the book.
Yes.
And probably only saw a couple scenes from the movie, or have seen a lot of memes of like Leo holding out a glass. But there is an understanding that the second you say that title, that there's a built-in expectation about opulence and grandeur.
Sure. Yeah.
And we all know that's a hard thing to do on stage, because you can do opulence for days in a movie, because you get close-ups and you get wide shots.
You also get an opportunity to have a cast of thousands.
Exactly.
You get to see
and a literal mansion.
A literal mansion like filled with like 5,000 people.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's about finding the ways that theatricalizes and that deconstructs into seeing a smaller window into those moments. And he's assisted by our amazing lighting designer Corey Paddock.
Yes.
Who is the one and only, and
the one,
and costumes Linda Cho, who is having a field day with this period, and with having pretty much every time our characters come on stage, they're in a new set of clothes,
fabulous clothes,
which is great. But I think that the main thing that we're all trying to do is to both achieve that level of opulence, but also, again, provide the ability for this story to be told on a very personal level, and on an emotional level, and to investigate the themes that the book digs into, and that we like that Maureen Corrigan book that she wrote about,
and we read on,
which is talking about why Gatsby has sustained over the years, and she calls it the great American novel about class. And somebody once said to me that all the most British plays are about class, and all American plays are about real estate. It's interesting that this is, which is actually kind of interesting. That
Say that again.
Yeah, well, a lot of British plays are about class, and American plays are about real estate. And if you think about it, like there are a lot of American plays are about like who gets the house.
Sure.
Or like people fighting about real estate.
Yeah, fighting about inheritance.
But what's interesting about this is that this is truly an American story about class, and class is something that we don't generally acknowledge about America.
We pretend we don't have
we're above it.
Yes.
Exactly. Right. And so that's I think one thing that's really interesting about
and it's
this challenge.
F. Scott Fitzgerald was obsessed with class, because he grew up in this. He never owned a piece of property, actually, which might be why he never his entire life as a child.
Wow.
They rented in a fancy neighborhood,
right?
And so he grew up around all these fancier people, and he grew up understanding that he was not quite a part of it, but that his family was sort of on the edge of it. And then
Grew up in
Minnesota. In Minnesota.
Right.
But in Minneapolis, which I didn't understand, it was like such a hub because of the way the trains worked. Like that was a huge metropolitan area.
Interesting, yeah.
And so he grew up in the city in the fanciest area, but they never owned property in it. And so then he came to New York and he would rent he literally rented like a cottage like Nick's cottage in Great Neck, which is basically where the story is set, and he was next to all these mansions, and that happened in 1922. That's where he was, and then in 1924, when he wrote the book, that's where he set this story.
Wow,
that's cool.
I'm full of factoids
yes.
about Fitzgerald right now.
Glad we have this round.
We've got to get to another
on.
question.
All right.
How did Jeremy Jordan and Eva Noblezada get cast in this show?
Well,
I think I texted Jeremy is the first thing that I did.
You've worked with him before.
Yeah, I've worked with Jeremy on a few different things. I think the last Broadway thing that he and I had done together was Bonnie and Clyde. But subsequent to that, we had done a lot of projects in like reading workshop and concert recording type stuff. Mm-hmm. And selfishly, as a composer who sings really high but really badly, there is nothing like working with someone who sings really high, really well. Make your dreams come true. So I remember that we were all talking about, who felt really right for this. And we all talked about Jeremy.
Yes.
And then the question was, what's the best way to sort of broach this with him? And I was like, well, we had
texted and then I nudged.
Yeah, because we had also just done Killer Party Big Cat.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Sidebar, you have to show that at some point.
Oh,
somewhere.
yeah.
That's just too much fun.
Which is the web series musical filmed during the pandemic.
That we created during the pandemic.
In everyone's living rooms.
In everyone's living room, yes.
While we waited to have a contract for The Great Gatsby.
Correct. So we could actually start on that. Oh, my God. Anyway, I just remember texting him, and I think his initial response was very funny. I think he said something along the lines of, sure, sounds cool if I'm not starring in a Marvel movie. I think he said that. I think that was his initial response. Yeah. Makes sense. I mean,
so we got Jeremy.
And he did a reading.
And he did a reading.
And
yes, he did a reading. And he did half of a reading.
He did most of the 3-week workshop.
Yeah, did the workshop.
Oh, right, because that was the first time.
Did a 3-week workshop that was.
He did 2 weeks of a 3-week workshop.
Then he possibly had an illness, so we're not allowed to disclose what it was. Maybe I don't know. Can you say those things anymore?
Happened.
Things happened.
I don't know. Things happened. But Nathan Tysen.
For the second time.
Was Gatsby for the second time.
Third time? Second time?
I mean,
we had 3 workshops, and presentation day, 2 of the 3 workshops, we lost our Gatsby. And I had to step in to play Gatsby both times. And found out on the train both times.
That's right. The morning of.
Going in.
Emergency cover.
Here we go.
Done.
And I watched your face both times, and you were like...
Okay. Oh and the first question, Jason's like, can we lower everything a third?
Song's down.
And my favorite, I have video footage of this, but my favorite is there's a song in the first act called Tea, which is a crazy, amazing...
A lot of patter.
A lot of props number. And I have a video of Dominique Kelley, our choreographer, doing the moves, doing the whole dance with Nathan singing in the corner.
Yes. We had a
2-part Gatsby for that number.
That's right.
Yes. Dance stunt double.
Yes, exactly.
For the Eva portion of the question.
Eva found out about that this was happening, and it's one of her favorite books. She reached out to us and said, we'd love to have a work session, and came in, and it was one of those moments where...
I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We all sat there watching this, and she did 2 songs and 3 scenes, I think.
Yeah.
And we
memorized, off book,
completely off book,
had it all.
I mean, was so engaged with this material
and ethereal
and just magical. And we just watched this and went, well, no one else can do this.
She walked out of the room, and we all stood
please?
up.
Like, oh my, like, will she do it? Like, I hope she'll do it.
Actually want to do this?
Yeah, she's just.
For a hot second.
Like, unbelievable.
Like, should we just stop her at the elevator?
Can we stop her at the elevator and just tell her?
Can we just tell her she got it?
Can we tell her now? And then the casting director was like,
okay.
Give
it a second.
Thank you, Stephen Copel.
Everybody
take a breath.
Stephen and Jillian have done an amazing job of casting this show for us.
None of us had worked with Eva?
No.
I had done one during same pandemic time. I had done there were like 30 songs for an Actors Equity fundraiser thing, and she had done a swing song, and that's how we met. And it was only through Zoom, and she was in California, I think. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. We just started talking about Dominique Kelley.
Dom brings an incredible perspective. What we wanted to do from the beginning was to try to have, again, this show have an active conversation with the present, that it lives in the 20s, but that there's something about it that makes it feel like when people watch it, they understand what it was to be in that period rather than depict that period in a museum kind of way. So what Dom does is to kind of, in a sense, remix these moves that were very much a part of the dance vocabulary of the 20s. But if you look at that, those moves have been in every era in some fashion. Yeah. And so finding a way that the experience of watching it from the audience today is giving you that kind of hyped up excitement that they were feeling at that moment. Yeah. And in addition to that, he is he's a choreographer who understands how to tell story with dance, who understands how to put this onto both our dancers of the ensemble and our folks of the ensemble who are less dancers, and so and finding all of that.
It's also funny, like the kind of movement that we get to play around with in here.
Well, that's one of the things about your treatment of this material that I think is also surprising is that the Great Gatsby is not known as a comedy per se, but there are moments of levity and there are moments of both joy and humor that come from the movement vocabulary that allow for us to earn those other moments, so that you're not sort of sitting in this morass of
that chandelier
feelings.
Going by in tea is one of my favorite moments.
It's so funny. It's such a great
the other thing I was going to say
number
about Dom that I feel like I remember him saying was that one of the interesting things about dance in the 20s was like the Charleston. It was the first time that people danced without touching, like. There was a freedom in the dance that women didn't need to be connected to
They
a
weren't
partner.
partner dancing.
Right, they were partner dancing without having to be contained and held by the man.
Yeah.
Which I also find really interesting because obviously modern dance full of that, but I love that conversation about active conversation with the present, because that's one of the things that he sort of identified for us is like there was a real freedom here that was suddenly bubbling up.
Yeah. And so the only time we do partner dancing is when we kind of we take it back a little bit and go to a moment sort of before the war and sort recreate a moment of nostalgia. And that's the only time you get like full partner dancing. Right. And everything else is much more front or side or playing with perspective.
But also a conversation about sexes and relationships that way.
Yeah.
By not touching.
And we're also at a period where tap dance is the advent of tap dance, and so we get a little bit of that as well.
And Dom is
an extraordinary
tap dancer.
God, he's amazing.
Look him up on YouTube. There's some incredible videos of Dom dancing.
Every time,
choreography is equally thrilling. Yeah.
Every time we had in auditions, every time we got to the part where they did a tap break, and all the people who like really tapped with Dom, I cried.
Yeah, I think we were all like,
I just cried.
I guess it's a thing. It's like musicians sharing, like solos.
Right.
Yeah.
They get in
They
a
call
circle.
it a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And they start a beat and they just go around.
And I sob.
They show off in the most beautiful way. Yeah. And Kait cries. It's great.
So good.
Amazing.
May it run forever. We just keep having on tap auditions.
Oh my gosh, yes. How long has this show been in development? And were we always intending to take it to Broadway? Great question.
First ever conversation about this musical was in the lobby of the Intercontinental Hotel in Korea.
Shout out Intercontinental.
Endorsement. Should have been at the Plaza. Bummer. With Mr. Shin, I had just worked on, I want to say like, he was developing an adaptation of Captain Nemo that I think I told you guys about, right?
Sure.
And so we had done a reading of that, and we were sitting in the lobby, and he said, I want to talk to you about a project. This is my favorite book. I want to talk to you about doing it, and I really want to do this in Korea. And that's where it started.
And
was
Mr. Shin is like, I don't know, like the Cameron McIntosh of
big
Korea.
Big producer in Korea. Tons of hit shows, like super successful. And he's also produced on Broadway before. He's had a couple of shows he produced on Broadway. And he's always been excited to return to that. But the initial impulse about this show, from what I remember, was not that.
Yeah.
It was, I want to be the one who does this in Korea.
And so, and you said, I want to write this with other Americans. This is an American story.
Well, specifically like the American class story, like when we identified that, I said to him, I really feel it's important because I had done other shows over there, either as a writer or a arranger, where the mix of the team didn't always match well to what the story was. And I knew for this story, I was like, there's a unique perspective here that I think we want to explore. And he said, great, who do you want to work with?
Well, and I think what's incredible about this is that there's a difference between opportunity and intention, and he provided the opportunity for the three of you to take a look at this material and find your way into it. Yeah. But the way that you found your way into it was very much of a perspective that was not born of of the idea of like we're making a Broadway show. You're gonna make your version of this material, and find a way into this. Yeah. And I think that smartly, one of the first things that you did was to try to find how this sang and what are the tools of a musical that can make this be resonant and deeper into the inner lives of each of these characters. And so that I think that once the opportunity presented itself, then there was very much an artistic conversation that made it feel more and more necessary. And I think that as the 2 songs and 3 scenes came about, there became a very clear point of view. Yeah. And as that point of view it started to evolve, and the songs came about, and then the book fueled the songs, and the songs fueled the book.
Well, even we did like 7 treatments. Remember?
Yeah.
And we sent him a bunch of treatments first. Yeah. And it was all just about how the end of the story. Yeah. And I remember he's been great about the notes are specific when they come. Mm-hmm. He's not somebody who's like throwing 100,000 notes at us. But I remember when the one big note was, we need Gatsby in this story sooner.
Yes.
That was a good note.
And it was a really good note.
It was a really good note. How to do that? How to
not quite as soon as we did at Paper Mill.
No. Yes. Well, but
spoiler alert.
But there was something interesting to me about on some level, knowing that we were originally writing this to go to South Korea. Right. We were freed up to write something that was a little bit more of a classic musical. Mm-hmm. And by classic musical, I just mean like some straightforward protagonist wants something big and goes after it hard.
Right. And maybe sings about it.
And there was something, I mean, Jay Gatsby wants something so bad. And it's so thrilling to actually let that drive the plot. And so it allowed us to take that frame of Nick off of it for a second and watch the propulsion of this plot come out of this man's action. Right. And then we figured out how to bring back the poetry of it and take a little bit less of it became something where we can have our cake and eat it too. Right. But that the 2 things that were most exciting when we first started working on it, we were like, well, this guy wants something so bad he's going to sing all the time. And so it was really exciting to write songs for Gatsby. And the other thing that was really exciting for me was specifically there was a scene that we never got to witness in the book between Daisy and Jordan. And we never got to hear what Myrtle was thinking when she was on her way to the plaza. Right. And those moments they're not just songs, but they're really exciting windows into what was going on with women in that time, because they had interesting things to talk about that do not make their way into the novel. And I got so excited about writing those scenes. And the idea for that scene between Daisy and Jordan that Nick hears about through Jordan in the book, but that we don't actually get to witness, was so much fun to invent and play with and figure out what Daisy's really thinking.
Just thinking about the Broadway bound of it.
Yeah.
Also, I remember when we did another reading because nobody knew which way we were going to go.
Yes.
And then Mark Hobie, you invited Mark Hobie to that.
I invited Mark Hobie.
You invited Mark Hobie.
Yeah.
I mean, you both knew Mark Hobie. I didn't know Mark. We obviously love Mark Hobie. But I remember that the surprise of, well, Paper Mill wants to do this. Oh, I guess we're on this trajectory now.
Well, sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once you have a barn, you got to put on a show.
That's right. And then maybe hoping to get another barn on the
Yeah.
Broadway. And here we are.
I mean, basic timeline, we started writing in earnest the summer of 21.
We started writing the
Right.
weekend I turned 50.
Yes.
Because you were at my house.
Yes, I had poison ivy
you
and you got
had
stung by wasps.
And our 3.5, our will be 3.5-year-old by
Yes.
the time we,
Yes.
she won't even be 3.5 by the time we open this.
Right.
She was 6 months old.
Right.
Sitting on my lap.
And sat on Jason's lap for the opening notes of Roaring On.
But I think
the party?
Never forget it.
Yeah.
one wonderful thing about this process was just there was always been such excitement and wonderful feedback with every step of development. And even after the first step, hearing it out loud, there was just this energy and this excitement, and Mr. Shin was excited, and we just said, if there's a world where we could develop it here first,
Yeah.
everything's going to be easier.
Well,
Well,
once
because
go to
we did
Korea,
the thing we're not
everything's gonna be
saying out loud.
translated.
We don't speak Korean.
Is that if we did it, if the first production of this was in Korean,
I'm not sure we would know how to
would have
fix
just
it.
been in translation, all of us, and everything would be really complicated and really hard.
Right.
And it would have, and being able to, we knew that we needed to at least do a lab here and try to work out all the kinks, but the ability to actually do that out of town production and then do it on Broadway is really
It's exciting to be a part of a history of how musicals are developed. Like this is what we got to move on.
Hey, I
More
have a
questions?
question. I have a question for you.
Great.
My question is, who is the villain in our musical, The Great Gatsby?
So I'll say it on the count of 3.
Capitalism.
Everyone.
The American dream.
I really didn't go very well.
American dream.
Who is the villain of The Great Gatsby, our musical?
Well, if we have to pick one of the characters,
Okay.
I would say that probably the one that people like the least is Tom. I mean, he's sort of the
Sure.
He
You love to hate him.
you love to hate Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if
but
he's
I-
anything like the Tom from the book, absolutely.
Yeah, he's even worse than our Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah. that's Tom.
Yeah. Well, yes, no,
Yeah.
he's but but I would say when you say capitalism, that certainly feels like the critique of the book
Right.
is
Right.
that's where the message of the
Right. And
the story lies.
I'm not
Apart from
advancing
the love
socialism
story,
here. I'm just, yeah.
Correct answer was the yellow Rolls Royce.
Who is the hero of Gatsby? That's my next question over here. I mean, it's a complicated thing because there's no. This is a book that and a musical that doesn't traverse in black and whites. I mean, there's like a
Right.
lot of gray areas,
Yeah.
and part of what makes it interesting is that people are not distilled down into heroes and villains,
Right.
and there's that's life. And Gatsby, yes, obviously he has this dream that Nick ultimately finds to be inspiring.
Right.
Yeah. And-
But at the same time, he has done it through nefarious means. He has
Yes.
gotten himself,
He's hurt people.
he has hurt people.
Yeah.
He has been, so obsessed with something that is never really going to happen for him necessarily.
No, but he's like our Joseph Campbell kind of hero. He's on a journey. He's the one who has the most want and the most path. But it's definitely like there's an anti-hero quality to him. And we were just talking to somebody who was saying basically that they identify more with Tom than with Gatsby because he does some pretty crazy shit in this. And I think that's super reasonable. And that's actually
Sure.
my favorite thing about working on a piece like this is that everybody is a villain and everybody is a hero and they're all their own heroes. They all believe very deeply in their own perspective and they think that they're right. And they're all not right. They're not all wrong, but they're not all right.
What's your favorite song? In
Oh,
The
that
Great
was
Gatsby?
gonna be mine.
I went first. You can ask what's your favorite lyric.
Okay. What's your favorite work of mine specifically?
I'm really curious.
What
What's your
line?
favorite song? What's your favorite song?
For her.
Okay.
My green light.
The Met.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I don't have my answer for that question. It's hard. The second somebody sings any one of the songs, that's my favorite song in that moment.
Oh, that's a nice feeling.
So
that's
great.
good.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I love that.
Because they're so, the cast is so amazing that you're just like, oh my God, sing that again.
Who is the character that you most identify with?
Probably Nick, I would say, as an observer.
It's like a
of life.
human. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that for me too, just because I often feel like I'm over here.
Yeah. I mean, sitting in the back of the theater watching everybody experience life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this would probably this would probably be a better question for the actors than for us in some ways, because we're all people who sit in the back and watch.
Well, and inherently, as the creative team, you have to put your mind in the heads of all of those characters. And hopefully find a way that they all make sense of their own realities and how those intersect.
It's the core reason I prefer to conduct the shows we work on, so that I don't have to sit back there and do that.
It's a busy season. I think maybe the most new musicals to ever open on Broadway. So we got to get people to buy some tickets, my friends.
Yes, we do.
Who is Gatsby for? Why should people come see this show?
We have a deluxe experience at the Broadway Theater. It's a deluxe experience in the way that it's designed. It has the opulence of what you go to see a Broadway show and expect to experience. But also we have one that is deeply emotional, has great soaring melodies, has a book that is complicated and funny and deep, and has an incredible commentary at the heart of it, but also a great love story. And I feel like it gives you all of these things that theater does well. And also it gives you this kind of experience that is spectacular, that is what Broadway can deliver, is something that is transporting and is a deluxe experience.
I think that's the big word for me, is transported, because people will come back and see this again, because as hard as some of the things are that happen late in the story, you are transported both to get to those moments and lifted back out of those moments. So that whole experience is when you're like, oh, I want to do that again.
Yeah. Come for the party, stay for the conversation. A little bit like there's something about making a musical on Broadway. It's not cheap. And I take it so seriously that we are asking you to fork over your hard-earned dollars to come see this. And I think you can see the opulence on stage, and you get this gorgeous party, all of this fun. We keep it fun for as long as possible. And then for me, I don't want it to just be fun. I want to have that conversation literally after the show. I want to go out for a drink or for a bite and have something to talk about with my friends. Yeah. That's not just, did I like the show, but what do you think about this? How did you identify with these characters? Like, I want it to be a conversation starter. And I think that this story is so rich. And so I think we've got this beautiful dichotomy. There's
a reason this book has been so poured over, discussed, debated, and this is a way in for a new generation to find their way to this material, and to send people back to the book, and to have conversations about the way that this adaptation interacts with that. Yeah. It's not saying that this is the definitive version. This is a version, and it is in musical form doing what the best of musicals do, to intersect with that story.
19-piece orchestra.
Oh my God, we haven't talked about that yet.
18-piece orchestra plus a conductor that doesn't have to play.
Thank God.
Can actually.
one of the largest orchestras on Broadway.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Live cars on stage. And I would also say some of the best musical theater performers. These people are monsters.
Oh my gosh.
On stage.
They're at the top of their game. These are the
best singers
and
I have ever heard.
They love each other in a way that is so thrilling to watch, and it just pours out on stage. You can just see how much of an ensemble this whole thing is. I think as much as like
even when they have to hate each other.
And as much as this is a story about Gatsby, it's such an ensemble piece, and you do sort of find yourself identifying with different people in the story, and I think that comes through with these actors. They make you feel for them. Even Tom.
I want to thank you all for coming to our round table, and we really hope to see you at the Broadway Theater, 53rd and Broadway. See you there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.